Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is under increasing pressure over multiple controversies surrounding his decision-making as leader of the Pentagon, over both the deadly second strike on that suspected drug boat in the Caribbean and his handling of classified military information in a group chat. Today, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the commander who ordered that double-tap strike on an alleged drug trafficking boat back in September we're on Capitol Hill today briefing lawmakers as members of Congress demand answers and increased transparency about the legality of that second strike, which some have said could be a war crime. Following that closed-door briefing, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee expressed deep concern after seeing the video of the incident.
But what I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors. Bad guys, but attacking shipwrecked sailors. Now, there's a whole set of contextual items that the Admiral explained. Yes, they were carrying drugs. They were not in the position to continue their mission in any way. People will someday see this video and they will see that that video shows, if you don't have the broader context, an attack on shipwrecked sailors.
But Republicans like Tom Cotton, the top Republican on the Senate Intel Committee, disagreed, saying the video showed the strike was justified.
The first strike, the second strike, and the third and the fourth strike on September 2nd were entirely lawful and needful, and they were exactly what we'd expect our military commanders to do.
What exactly did you see in terms of the video of the second strike? Were there survivors?
I saw two survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs bound for the United States back over so they could stay in the fight.
Speaking yesterday in the Oval Office, President Trump said he would support releasing the video of that controversial follow-up strike. Amid that controversy, Secretary Hegseth is also facing renewed scrutiny for the information he shared on a Signal group chat. You might remember this. This happened back in March about a pending military operation in Yemen. Today, the Pentagon Inspector General released a long-awaited report on the role the defense secretary played in the so-called Signalgate saga. In it, investigators concluded Hegseth violated military regulations, writing, quote, "The secretary's actions created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots." The report also says Secretary Hegseth declined to be interviewed as a part of the probe, instead providing just a written statement to investigators. Joining me now is NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube, who is on Capitol Hill for us. So, Courtney, break down these different reactions that we are hearing from lawmakers based on which side of the aisle they're on.
Yeah, so it's split down the aisle, frankly, Kristen. On the Republican side, they are saying there's nothing to see here and that they believe that the orders were all lawful and legal. On the Democrat side, we are hearing about great concerns after seeing the full video that has become the subject of so much consternation and conversation over the last week since that blockbuster report out of the Washington Post that there was, in fact, a second and then additional follow-on strikes after against a boat on September 2nd. This was the first time the U.S. military struck one of these alleged drug boats in the Caribbean Sea. Now, we have heard from a number of lawmakers today who've come out of these briefings. The briefings themselves, of course, are classified in a secure facility, so we've not heard anything from either Admiral Bradley, he was the JSOC commander at the time, he's now the head of U.S. Special Operations Command, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, who is alongside him in these classified briefings. But we have heard from a number of senators and representatives on both sides of the aisle. I had an exchange with Senator Kuhn, who was one of the members who was briefed on this, and here's a little of what he had to say. Senator Cotton, that the boat was flipped over and the survivors are trying to flip it back right side. Is that your understanding?
That's a fair characterization.
Was the strike after the survivors had climbed back in the boat? Or did they ever climb back in the boat? It feels unclassified to me.
I'm trying to avoid making something unclassified that's currently classified, to the best of my understanding. Senator Cotton and I came out with different understandings of what we saw.
So that was one of the new facts that we learned here today from these senators. It was Senator Cotton who first said that the boat was actually flipped over and the survivors were in the water, and that was evident on the video. What's still unclear, though, Kristen, is were they actually trying to flip it over and still use it as a boat to continue on with their mission? We've also learned, according to several sources familiar, that in fact they were in some sort of communication with a mothership, and that may have factored into the ultimate decision to take that second strike.
Well, Courtney, what an excellent job you did there pressing Senator Coons. Well done, I must say. Let me ask you where this goes from here, because we know that there have been calls for this to become a public hearing. These were closed-door briefings that happened today. What are you hearing about any potential momentum to continue to push for that?
Yeah, there are still senators and members who are calling for open hearings, but we're not hearing about anything imminent on that front. You know, there is one thing that I have noticed is a pretty consistent line coming out, no matter which side of the aisle the senator or the representative is on, is they are all very supportive of Admiral Bradley, Admiral Mitch Bradley, the head of SOCOM, saying that he had a difficult decision and that he made the decision in the moment. One of the things that we learned is that he did actually have a judge advocate general, a JAG, in the room with him during this mission. That would be standard, but that's been one of the questions that we've been trying to figure out is, did he have legal counsel when he ultimately made the decision to carry on not just the second strike, but the third and the fourth strikes that ultimately ended up sinking that boat and killing all 11 people on board?
Well, that's a significant revelation there as well, Courtney. Let me ask you about the other matter facing Secretary Hegseth, his use of the platform Signal to discuss pending military operations. Secretary Hegseth responded to the report, writing on social media, quote, total exoneration. But, Court, that's not what the report says, right? How big of a firestorm is this?
You know, we've been trying to figure out what exonerates him exactly. Here's the facts, as we first heard about yesterday, and now the report confirms. That is that it found that the information that was transmitted by then head of Central Command, General Eric Kurilla, was classified as secret no foreign. That means secret, not for distribution to any foreign nationals. Now, Secretary Hegseth took that information at that level of classification, put it on his personal phone in the unclassified Signal app, the communications app, and transmit it not only to other members of the administration, but then to other people like his wife, his brother, and some other friends of his. At no point is there any proof that that information was declassified. The one thing that the report does say, though, is the secretary is a declassifying authority. He has the ability to classify, but there's no indication that he actually did that. I don't see how the secretary and those around him are classifying that as an exoneration, but they continue to post that on social media today, Kristen.
All right, Courtney Kube, phenomenal reporting as always. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We want to turn now to another breaking news story here in Washington, the arrest of a suspect in a years-long investigation into pipe bombs placed near the DNC and RNC headquarters on January 5th, 2021, the night before the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The FBI today identifying Brian Cole Jr. of Woodbridge, Virginia, as the suspect, seen here in video released by the FBI in the months after the incident, appearing to leave what authorities say were pipe bombs outside the DNC and RNC headquarters on Capitol Hill. Cole is now charged with transporting an explosive device and attempted malicious destruction by means of explosive materials.
We did not discover any new information. What we did, an investigation spearheaded by the deputy director and the ADIC of our Washington field office, brought in a new team of investigators and experts, re-examined every piece of evidence, sifted through all the data, something that the prior administration refused and failed to do. As a result of that, we generated numerous investigative leads, executed multiple legal process with our U.S. attorney partners, and came to this conclusion today. And that is why we were able to safely secure this individual into custody.
In a criminal complaint filed today against Cole, investigators say they have evidence that he bought bomb-making equipment in the months and years before the incident. They say cell phone data also points to Cole being near the RNC and DNC headquarters at the time the bombs were planted. Today's arrest marks the culmination of an exhaustive multi-year investigation by the FBI, which included a $500,000 reward, millions of pieces of evidence as well. That evidence included several pieces of video that show the suspect's whereabouts on January 5th, as well as close-ups of his shoes, a rare set of Nikes, of which only 25,000 pairs had been manufactured at the time the pipe bombs were discovered. NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins me now, along with NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Thanks to both of you for being here. Kelly, let me start with you. Of course, FBI officials, law enforcement officials held that big news conference today. What are you learning about the suspect?
We know he is a 30-year-old man who lives in Woodbridge, Virginia. We don't know anything about motivations yet. What really stands out in this investigation is some of what you alluded to there, that by virtue of using existing data, cell phone records, license plate readers that are scanned in the District of Columbia, and then purchase records once they had an identity and began looking at his banking records, found purchase of many component parts that they say were a part of the bombs. Remember, these bombs did not go off. So once they were safely diffused, they had the specific equipment, and they could then try and trace those individual parts. They were able to put that picture together. So by placing him at the scene of the surveillance video that we've all been seeing for 5 years, based on phone records, and tying him to the devices through purchase records, they were able to identify him.
Kelly, did they say anything about what the motive may have been here?
None of that has been disclosed at this point, and they say that there is more information that they will do. Today, they executed search warrants at his family home. That may lead them to information in everyone who is taken into custody who has an electronic treasure trove of email and searches on their computers. All of that kind of stuff is perhaps where they go next, but no indication of what caused this. And of course, it was on the eve of January 6th, and I asked the Attorney General and the FBI Director if there is any link to January 6th, and obviously the President pardoned all January 6th conspirators, and they did not respond to that.
Okay, well, really important question that you asked there, Kelly, certainly on the minds of everyone watching this unfold. And I wonder, both the FBI Director and the Attorney General made a big point of noting that this investigation has been going on for years, and it was not until they got into office that they were able to solve this. Did they talk about what led them to this suspect? What was the breaking point?
Well, they were certainly very critical of the prior administration. And of course, during the prior administration, the investigators at the FBI and the Department of Justice were investigating 1,500 January 6th conspirators. So you have to factor that into the investigative process. Nevertheless, this arrest happened on the Trump administration's watch, and they say that it was by going back with a fresh set of eyes, some enhancements in some of the technology, but looking at the existing data to try to identify potential suspects, and then once identifying, again through license plates and cell phones, then going into the purchase records to pull this together.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell, great job at the press conference. Thank you so much for being here with all of your great information. We really appreciate it. Yamiche, let me turn to you. Kelly was just saying this, of course. President Trump pardoned all the January 6th defendants in his first day in office. How does today's arrest square with the president's previous actions with regards to the final days of his first term?
Well, Kristen, White House officials are really trying to separate these two things, January 6th and the attack on the Capitol, and then this man who was accused of placing bombs at all of these different locations. So we asked the White House specifically, how do you square those two things, given the fact that the president pardoned all of these January 6th protesters, rioters, violent people who attacked police? I want to read to you a statement that the White House gave us answering that question. They said it's alarming and insulting that fake news, NBC, their words, would compare an individual who placed live bombs throughout D.C. to the countless individuals who were over-prosecuted and targeted by a weaponized Biden DOJ. So that's the way that they're seeing January 6th rioters. They went on to say this false equivalence is one of many reasons why trust in the media is at an all-time low. So that's the White House's messaging there. But there are a lot of people who are saying this person who was placing, allegedly placing bombs at these political headquarters, that they are also sort of trying to do the same, or we're trying to do the same kind of violent actions that we saw play out on January 6th, where we saw, of course, lawmakers running for their lives and a number of people breaking into the U.S. Capitol. That said, the tone coming out of the White House, apart from sort of the comparisons to January 6th, is one of sort of taking a victory lap. They are really critical of the Biden administration and say that it's when they came into office that things were able to get moving, that this person was able to get apprehended, Kristen.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor at the White House for us. Yamiche, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Ahead, Democrats release a plan that would keep health care premiums from skyrocketing for millions of Americans in just a few weeks. But is it dead on arrival? We'll get a reality check from the Hill. Plus, relax, take it easy. That's Speaker Johnson's message to Americans on the issue of affordability as his grip on the Republican conference is put to the test. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. With less than a month until health insurance premiums are set to skyrocket for millions of Americans, Democrats today unveiled a plan to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years and prevent premiums from spiking. Look.
The bill, a clean 3-year extension of ACA tax credits that Democrats will bring to the floor of the Senate for a vote next Thursday, and every single Democrat will support it. Republicans have 1 week to decide where they stand. If Republicans block our bill, there's no going back. We won't get another chance to halt these premium spikes before they kick in at the start of the new year. Those insurance premiums in January will land like a hammer blow on the American people.
But the Democrats' bill is likely to fail, as many Republican senators have already made clear they don't support any extension of the ACA tax credits. And with Republicans still not offering a health care plan of their own, hope of a bipartisan agreement to avoid the health care cliff coming after the holidays appears to be dwindling. Joining me now to discuss all of this from Capitol Hill is NBC News senior national politics reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, thanks so much for being here. So talk about the strategy here. There you have Leader Schumer proposing this 3-year extension that he knows is likely dead on arrival.
That's absolutely right, Kristen. And the reason is senators see across both parties here that there's no deal to be had. And I'll give you both parties' perspective. Democrats say they've been eager to cut a deal for months now. They've offered a 1-year extension of this funding, a 2-year extension. They've been willing to negotiate on things like income thresholds and making reforms and restrictions on this amount of funding. They even shut down the government over it, had the longest ever government shutdown in American history. And Republicans were simply unwilling to negotiate on that. And I spoke just in the last couple of hours to Senator Angus King, who cut that deal to reopen the government because he was hopeful for a health care deal. He told me he no longer sees a path to that, in part because Republicans are demanding stricter abortion restrictions, which is, unlike the other thing that I mentioned, a deal breaker for the Democrats. And the Republican perspective is this funding was passed under President Biden on a party line vote by Democrats. This is tied to the Affordable Care Act, a law they've never liked, that they've never supported. And they're not, when they have the trifecta, going to do something that, in their view, is propping up Obamacare. The problem is, Kristen, at the end of the day, we can talk about, process and procedure and bipartisanship and whatnot on the Hill. There are millions of Americans who will suffer if nothing happens here. And the Republicans' problem is they do not have an alternative.
But here's the thing, Sahil, there have been some bipartisan proposals floated today. For example, Representatives Kiggins and Gottheimer offered their own framework, which would include a 2-year extension of the ACA subsidies. And there have been others. Why aren't these gaining traction?
Yeah, there are a couple of bipartisan proposals, mostly in the House, for an ACA funding extension. This new one from Gottheimer and Kiggins includes 15 Republicans and 20 Democrats. But the answer to your question, Kristen, is that it's the same group of 12 to 15 House Republicans that is who are the only ones who want to do anything about extending ACA funds. Most of them are in swing districts. They will feel the political pain most acutely, and they're, they have the most political incentive and impetus to want to do something about this. But outside those 15 Republicans, which, remember, it's a small fraction of this conference, the vast majority of them want this ACA funding to go away entirely, which is why Speaker Mike Johnson candidly has not given these members the time of day on the floor. He has not given any indication that these bills are going to come to the floor, that he's going to allow an ACA funding continuation in any form at this time.
So, Sahil, given that, what are the potential political implications for both parties?
22 million Americans are going to see their premiums increase, in many cases double. On average, double. It could be as much as tripling for Americans next year, just in a few weeks, starting in January, if nothing happens. So that would be a significant political hit to very likely the party in power who tends to get blamed for this stuff. In the same way that that President Biden and the Democrats got blamed when costs went up on their watch, whatever they wanted to say about the reasons, they're the ones who ended up getting blamed. This is where I think Republicans are likely going to have to come up with a pretty good explanation for this if nothing happens from a policy standpoint. Kristen?
Yeah, the midterms are nigh. All right. Sahil, thank you so much for that great reporting and analysis, as always. Joining me now, today's panel, Julia Manchester, White House reporter for The Hill, Democratic strategist Joel Payne, and Michael Dubke, former Trump White House communications director. Thanks to all of you for being here. Julia, let me start with you. It just doesn't seem like they are going to be able to reach an agreement on extending these health care subsidies, unless I'm missing something. Do you think there could be an 11th hour off-ramp here?
I mean, I think there certainly is the incentive, obviously, for an 11th hour off-ramp for both parties. Obviously, of course, we want, everyone who needs health care to have those subsidies if there isn't some sort of a replacement. But also, we know that Republicans historically have struggled on this issue, and you're already seeing Democrats trying to go on the offense going into the midterms on this issue of health care. And the comments that Speaker Johnson made to Melanie Zanona earlier today saying, relax, when he was asked about this, I would imagine that Democrats are going to take that and run with it, because obviously when your health care could be in jeopardy, it's hard to relax about that.
Okay, so you take me, let's hear that sound actually. You are referencing our colleague Melanie Zanona did ask House Speaker Mike Johnson about this health care issue and the broader issue of affordability. Here's that exchange. Look.
We got more to do. But the problem was created by the Democrats, not this administration and not this Republican Congress. We're the ones fixing it. So I would tell everybody, relax, okay? Calm, common sense, competency. That's what we're demonstrating here every day. We're exactly on the trajectory of where we've always planned to be. Steady at the wheel, everybody. It's going to be fine. Our best days are ahead of us. Americans are going to be feeling a lot better in the early part of next year.
Mike? Do you buy that argument, and is that the right argument for the House Speaker to be making?
I think you're absolutely correct that this is going to be a big issue in the midterms. And frankly, if Obamacare was well put together, we would never need subsidies to begin with. So I think that's what Speaker Johnson was referring to. And what I find offensive is Minority Leader Schumer pushing a 3-year extension when he knows that Republicans aren't going to go for that. If he had gone for the 1-year extension to try to give some breathing room for everybody to figure out how we fix some of the fraud, how we fix some of the means testing, I think we would be able to do that. But it is beyond belief to me that either side can't come to the table when 22 million Americans could see some coverage go sky high.
Well, Joel, pick up on that point that Mike's making. I mean, Leader Schumer is offering something that he knows is going to be dead on arrival. Given that, if in fact this all does go over a cliff, is this going to be a pox on everyone's house, basically?
Well, I think Republicans have hard questions to answer about why something that would cover Americans and prevent healthcare for spiking for millions of Americans, even if it's on a 3-year basis, would be dead on arrival. I mean, that is for Republicans to deal with their constituents over, and I think Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats are totally within their stead to do that. But I have 2 other observations. One, Mike Johnson is a deeply unpopular speaker right now, not with Democratic strategists like myself, but with his own caucus. So he's got a lot of problems. He's taken on a lot of water. So I think it's very interesting that it'll be interesting if that clip comes back to haunt him a bit. Also, I think congressional Democrats would be in a much stronger leverage position had they not backed off of their government shutdown position from about a month ago. And I can tell you a lot of Democrats feel that way. If Democrats would have actually held strong and used the leverage at the time to force Republicans to come up with a solution on health care, I actually think that Democrats would have a little bit more credibility with their base. So, yes, I think Democrats certainly have an attack opportunity here, but they gave up leverage.
Maybe their base, but not the American people.
Yeah,
I mean, at that point, that's all that they were playing to was their base by keeping the government shut down.
I think the American people have said that this is an important issue to them, so that reflects.
I want to talk big picture a little bit, which is that, and this goes to something you were saying, Mike, which is at the root of this is Republicans saying that they feel like Obamacare is deeply flawed.
Yes.
Secretary Bessent was on Meet the Press several weeks ago and said that the president was going to make an announcement on a health care plan, something to effectively supplant or replace potentially Obamacare. We never got that announcement, Julia. Do you have any sense that Republicans are working on a plan, something beyond concepts of a plan?
So we know that President Trump has talked about these direct payments, and he has floated that. And I think that's something the president does. He floats these ideas out into the ether, if you will, and tries to get feedback. I haven't heard of anything concrete. We know that next week he is going to Pennsylvania to talk about affordability. And I do think affordability and health care, particularly on an issue like prescription drug prices, certainly go hand in hand. But I think, a good point you made was, or, what I've heard other Republicans say is, Obamacare wasn't put well together. The problem is, I don't think Republicans have figured out how to message that, because poll after poll that I've seen shows that Americans are very scared still about losing Obamacare. I think part of that could be because there isn't a clear alternative, but I think Republicans need to figure out how to message on that. I think they struggled with it, obviously, in 2018 and in subsequent elections.
I was just going to say, and I don't know Mike too well, although Mike seems like a nice guy. And, I've heard Republicans like Mike speaking about this for the last 15 years. I actually worked for Harry Reid back in 2009, 2010 when we passed the Affordable Care Act, and Republicans were saying the same thing back then. They were saying the American people wouldn't like it. Guess what? The American people do like it. They care about it. They care about their health care being affordable. Is it perfect legislation? No, because Republicans undercut it at the time, and they have done nothing since then to try to make it better.
Mike, pick up on that and talk about the intersectionality of health care and affordability.
Well, first of all, I think anytime you pass a piece of legislation without some members of the other party being with you, you're going to create flawed pieces of legislation. Both on the left and right, and you did not have votes from Republicans on Obamacare. First of all. Secondly, affordability and healthcare do go hand in hand, Kristen, because it's one of the largest outlays for an American family. So it's important, and Republicans recognize that, and they understand that, and that's why they want to fix it. There are Republicans working on a bipartisan plan, but it's not seeing the light of day.
Yeah, what about the messaging that we're hearing from the White House, and I'll go back to you on this, Mike, about affordability, where the president's saying it's a hoax?
Yeah,
is that going to work in the midterms?
It's not a hoax. I think what the president was reacting to are some other stories. I know he understands that he won in 2024 on the affordability issue. And I know others in the White House are very keen that he gets back on the road talking about affordability. So I think that was in reference to some stories and not necessarily that globally affordability is a hoax.
Joel, final point.
Well, one, don't erase Olympia Snowe, because she voted for that health care bill back in 2009. I think that Republicans, whether or not we can go through a history of Obamacare, Republicans have a problem with an affordability crisis, with health care being too expensive, and the American people thinking that they're responsible for it. Whether or not we up here think they are, the American people think they're responsible for it.
All right, well, one thing is certain. This is going to continue to be a big issue, affordability, one of the top issues for voters as we head more deeply into the midterms. Thanks, guys. Great conversation, Julia, Joel, and Mike. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, finding common ground. Senators Amy Klobuchar and Lindsey Graham sit down together to talk about bipartisanship in these polarizing times and their push to reunite thousands of Ukrainian children with their families after being kidnapped by Russian forces. That interview with Julie Serkin next on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to the latest in the U.S. efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met today in Florida with a top Ukrainian official. The meeting comes 2 days after Witkoff and Kushner met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And his First Lady Melania Trump announced today that 7 Ukrainian children who had been separated from their families have been reunited. The First Lady announced in October that she was communicating with President Putin in an attempt to reunify families torn apart by the war. Ukraine has accused Russia of abducting nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children since the start of the war. It's an issue that has drawn bipartisan condemnation on Capitol Hill. In the latest edition of our Finding Common Ground series, NBC's Julie Serkin sat down with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham to discuss their work to hold Russia accountable and their broader efforts at working across the aisle.
Why did you partner together on the issue of Ukrainian children who've been abducted?
Ladies first.
Okay.
So Lindsey and I actually have worked together on Ukraine issues for a long time. My first trip to Ukraine was with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, and that was after the first invasion. And from the very beginning, Lindsey has stood up on New Year's Eve in the middle of a blizzard with John McCain, and we were in the Donbass region. We were there for a number of days. And through thick or thin, he has stood with the Ukrainians. And I've always really admired him for that. And the fact that we've been able to make this a bipartisan issue has been really important through 2 different administrations. So the kids, I'm a former prosecutor and a mom. And to me, the fact that you have thousands and thousands of kids that were stolen and taken away from either their families or an orphanage, a number of the ones that I met recently in Rome, when the Pope took a visit with us and with the kids, was about actually teenagers who were taken when their mom was killed, another was just taken from a school, and they have the wherewithal, because they're teenagers, to get a phone from someone, and they're able to call their grandma in one case, and she was with us, and they were able to get them out. And the Vatican's been really involved in negotiating a number of kids' release. But the fact that Putin thinks it's okay to take kids out of orphanages and away from their families just shows the evil we're dealing with and why it is so important for us to stand with Ukraine, this sovereign state that has taken all the bloodshed and basically stopped Putin from marching right through Ukraine to other allies, NATO countries.
Yeah, so number one, I found out about this issue through her. She had a resolution, I think, basically a Senate resolution condemning Putin for, taking 19,000 plus kids out of occupied territories, sending them to Russia, trying to turn them into Russians. I didn't really know anything about it, and I talked to Amy and a few others, and I said, when you list the bad things of this war, the list is long, I'd put this near the top. I mean, for any century, this is an outrage. Most people don't know that in the occupied territories of Ukraine, the Russians have separated Ukrainian children from their families, sent them back to Russia, put them in re-education camps, sent them to the front lines to fight for Russia and their Ukrainian kids, trying to wipe out their identity as Ukrainians. And I want the world to know about it. There cannot be a just end to this war until these kids are accounted for.
The issue of kids is something you two have partnered on a lot, even when it comes to tech, right? The only issues I feel like where there's any bipartisanship now is tech and Ukraine. That's what it feels like.
There's some, but those are 2 big ones. Those are 2 good ones.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of areas of disagreement. I mean, Americans think that there's just so much stalemate in both parties. They don't trust Congress. They don't trust the media either. But how do you rebuild that trust?
So I just figure courage is not just standing by yourself giving a speech to an empty Senate chamber, but courage is whether or not you're willing to stand with someone you don't always agree with for the betterment of this country. And to me, that tech issue is literally the interests have pushed so hard that nothing has really passed, not a privacy law, not any kind of liability when it comes to getting kids hooked on drugs or seeing pornography. And Senator Cruz and I did pass in one bill this year with the president's support that they have to take down non-consensual porn. And that is within 48 hours. But that's really the first one that's passed. And so Senator Graham is thinking big on this from the beginning, has said they have to be responsible. And I've joined him in those efforts.
Yes, she did. And, we're taking on the biggest companies in the history of the world. These companies make a gob of money through advertising. The more eyeballs, the more money they charge for ads. There was a time when we needed to make sure the internet would be up and running and flourish. Al Gore invented it. We want to make sure it worked well. Well, we've come to the point now where the dark side has to be dealt with.
What is the mood like? I mean, you've both been here for a while. Is there just as much vitriol behind the scenes as it appears to be online and on television?
If you know Amy, she's very determined. She's she embraces her causes, and I like whether I agree with her cause or not. I like people who are passionate about what they do. She's determined, and I'm determined too, to hold Putin accountable for kidnapping 20,000 children. And when he says he hadn't, he's a liar. And we can't end this war with this unaccounted for, because it'll happen again and again when it comes to social media. Every parent out there, grandparent, you know what we're talking about. I mean, she cares, I care, all of us care, but why a few people? A lot of people in politics now are new, and the reward for solving problems is a lot less than for yelling. Yeah. And I don't want to just be up here yelling all my life. I'd like to solve problems that matter to people. And you'll find out pretty quick in both caucuses who you can go to if you need to get something done that makes sense. And Amy is on top of the list. If you can convince her this is just cause, she'll jump in. I'd like to be considered somebody that if you can convince me it makes sense, I want to get outcomes. And I can't think of a better use of my time or her time than give relief to parents and grandparents suffering from their children and grandchildren having their lives turned up down by social media. I can't think of a better cause than trying to get 20,000 kids back with their family.
So is that pool of lawmakers that Senator Graham was just talking about, is it growing or is it shrinking?
It depends on different issues. That's right. Surprising people will work together. Yeah. It happens all the time. You know, Rand Paul's been working on the tariffs. Like there are an interesting group.
No more interesting person than Rand Paul.
Okay, so people
and I'm not working with him on tariffs.
All right. People have worked across the aisle on different things. So I hope it's increasing. And I will say, you know, when you asked about what it's like, people behind closed doors do have cordial relationships in the Senate. There's only 100 of us. And it's part of it is, you know, it's one thing to work together, but then, you know, don't go stab someone behind their back. If you just agree with them on something, fine. Or don't go trash them personally. You might disagree with their view, but it can get, when it gets like that. So that's for me one of the lines in the sand. And I actually like to get things done. I figure my constituents sent me to Washington to try to get something done, not to fight all the time.
But things do get personal. I mean, you're very good friends with the president.
Yeah.
You know that he makes some statements maybe you don't even endorse, but he does get personal. Does it make it harder to work with people in his party, given...
He's Trump. And he's going to be Trump. But, you know, I think he'll, Melania's been great, right? She's shown the light on it. I think President Trump would probably cheerlead this stuff, and you know, we need to give him a product that's bipartisan. Go sit down, Mr. President, you got a chance. If you get behind this, we can get it through the House.
I think it's made it harder to get things done overall, but it hasn't changed my relationship with people in the Senate.
NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin joins me now. Julie, what a fantastic conversation. And I thought it was fascinating the way you got the two of them to interact. We saw some smiles, something we don't see.
Yeah, some laughs and jokes.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And I know that they also talked about the late Senator John McCain. Senator Lindsey Graham was very close with him. Talk a little bit about how that played out in the conversation.
That stood out to me too. 7 years after the senator died, it is so telling that he's still seen as someone who connects both sides of the aisle. That came through in this interview so much, and Senator Graham was so close to him. And right after the interview, that stuck out to me so much that I actually went on a deep dive, and I found a post from Senator Graham back from 2017 when the president first insulted John McCain for tanking then their efforts to try and abolish the Affordable Care Act. Graham posted and said that his friendship with McCain is not based on how he votes, but respect for how he's lived his life and the person that he is. And I think that's just such a powerful statement and something we don't hear often nowadays. You know, Graham traveled with McCain a lot. They were friends for decades, but Amy Klobuchar invoked him too in talking about how they were in Ukraine together. She told this story of how John McCain, even in his final days, remembered a moment that they had with the then president of Ukraine, where he handed them a rifle and a revolver and all these gifts when they were visiting that country. So just such personal examples that still linger on, and he's still such a shining beacon of what it means to be bipartisan, which I don't think we see a lot anymore. And hopefully Amy Klobuchar and Senator Graham had said that they want it to continue.
Well, look, this is a segment and a series that we're dedicated to here at NBC, and what a fantastic conversation. And I think you're right. One of Senator McCain's biggest legacy points is the fact that he was this beacon of bipartisanship, and what a wonderful conversation. Julie Sirkin, thank you for bringing it to us. We really appreciate it. All right, after the break, a key CDC advisory committee delays a high-stakes vote on whether to reverse a key vaccine recommendation for newborns. Stay with us. We'll delve into all of it on Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Turning now to the CDC, where a vaccine advisory panel handpicked by HHS Secretary R.F.C. Jr. is weighing whether to scrap the agency's longstanding recommendation that babies receive the hepatitis B vaccine within 24 hours of birth. That vote, which was planned for today, is now expected tomorrow. Giving newborns the Hep B vaccine has been credited with driving down infections in kids by 99% since it was implemented. But it has become the latest target of vaccine skeptics, including some on the CDC's advisory panel. The panel has been under scrutiny since R.F.C. Jr. fired all its members earlier this year and replaced them with his own picks. Joining me now from inside the CDC headquarters in Atlanta is NBC medical reporter Erica Edwards. Erica, thanks so much for being here on a busy day. So today's delay comes after the vote was also scrapped during the panel's September meeting. Can you take us behind the scenes? What's driving this latest delay?
Hey, Kristen. Yeah, so like in September, there continues to be a massive amount of disagreement and confusion about the data that are being presented, as well as what the panel members are even supposed to vote on. Now, if they can pull it together for tomorrow, it is expected that the committee will have enough votes to reverse that recommendation that all newborns get that hepatitis B vaccine. That expectation drew a small crowd of protesters outside of the CDC headquarters today, advocating for vaccines and public health in general. Kristen?
Well, you know, talk a little bit about why the hepatitis B vaccine is given right away, that first 24 hours, and then the impact, right? I mean, it's decreased infections by 99%.
Yeah, that's right. You know, hepatitis B can be transmitted from a pregnant woman who might not even know that she's been infected to her baby during delivery. And giving the vaccine within those first 24 hours after the baby is born, like you said, dramatically cuts the risk that the baby will get sick. This has been standard practice for more than 30 years. Pediatricians tell me there's no evidence that there's any safety issues with that shot. But critics say that they're concerned that the shot might produce a fever in a small baby. And, a fever in a baby isn't necessarily harmful. What they're concerned about is that there might be interventions done on that child, like blood work to determine the cause of the fever. Kristen?
Well, what exactly would the changing guidance mean for those who want to opt in to the vaccine at birth?
Yeah, so remember the CDC recommendations are just that. They're not mandatory. So families who still want to get the shot theoretically could do so, but access would indeed be impacted because CDC recommendations help determine insurance coverage, including for programs like Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program. Kristen, 37 million kids are in those programs.
Wow. All right. Erica, thank you so much for your reporting. We really appreciate it. And still to come, tensions boiling in the Middle East and the future of President Trump's peace plan between Israel and Hamas. Israel's ambassador to the U.S. joins us in studio next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Israel's military confirmed it carried out strikes in southern Gaza yesterday, with the IDF saying it was in response to an attack earlier in the day that injured 5 Israeli soldiers. This was the scene as a fire broke out in a tent encampment following that strike. It's the latest incident of violence testing President Trump's ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas that went into effect in October. And it comes after Israel announced it would reopen the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt in the coming days, but only for people to exit from Gaza to Egypt. Officials in Egypt, however, denied they are coordinating with Israel to reopen the border crossing, adding that if an agreement is reached to reopen the crossing, movement would have to be open in both directions. Joining me now is the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Leiter. Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be with you, Kristen.
We really appreciate it. It's an honor to have you here. I want to start off by talking about the state of the ceasefire in Gaza right now. How would you describe it? Is it still holding? Do you anticipate it will continue to hold?
Very hopeful, but concerned. We're delighted that the administration was able to maneuver into a ceasefire, get almost all of our hostages released. We still have one body that we expect to bring home. We're waiting for that so we can move into phase 2, which is the disarming of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza, which will open up a whole vista of hope, both for the Gazans and for Israelis.
Well, you say you're concerned. Tell me what the root of your concern, what your potential skepticism is at this point.
You know, the West very often miscalculates, misunderstands that there are people with ideas that are very often very hostile to the West, very hostile to Israel. And Hamas believes, I mean, they're an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was just outlawed and sanctioned by the president through an executive order. And they believe in the destruction of Israel. And they're not actually coming and delivering their arms and saying, mea culpa, we made a mistake, we'd like to live side by side. They're still committed to this idea of repeating October 7th. We can't let that happen. We can't have jihadis at our border. So hopeful, yes, but concerned that it's going to be very difficult to get Hamas to actually give up on their arms and admit defeat.
Well, the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry says 350 people have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the October ceasefire went into effect. Is Israel still committed to abiding by the terms of the ceasefire?
Well, of course we're committed to abiding by the terms of the ceasefire. But, Christian, you just quoted the Gaza Health Ministry. I mean, that's like quoting, you know, MS-13 Social Welfare Ministry. I mean, these people are terrorists.
What number would you say? How many people do you think have been killed since this ceasefire went into effect?
We hope it's a minimal amount as possible. We're not interested in killing people. We're interested in providing defense for our civilians that were slaughtered on October 7th. And if they come over the line with guns, which they do constantly, they pop out of these tunnels that they've built, these terror tunnels that they built with international funds. They pop out of nowhere and shoot at our civilians and at our soldiers. So we have to return fire. We're trying to limit it as much as possible. We want the ceasefire to hold. We will do everything we can that the ceasefire holds. But we're not going to allow Hamas to reconstitute their terror intentions.
Do you think that the terms of the ceasefire have been violated on either side at this point? Because as you say that you're firing in self-defense. But given that there has been this level of violence, is that a violation on either side of this ceasefire?
You know, firefighters often use force to put out a fire. We're not on equal footing. This is a terrorist organization, and we have an army that belongs to the democratically elected government of Israel. We are intent on keeping a ceasefire, but we're fighting with terrorists. And they lie, and they cheat, and they kill.
Let me ask you about the Rafah crossing. Egypt says it will only open the Rafah crossing if movement goes both ways, both in and out of Gaza. What can you tell us about the state of reopening the Rafah crossing? Will it be reopened both ways?
First of all, it's really important that finally Egypt is agreeing to the Rafah crossing being open and that people can leave. During the course of these 2 years of warfare, there were many Gazans that wanted to leave but couldn't because Egypt refused to open up the crossing. So if it's about to be opened, we're very enthusiastic. And I think the issue about if it's two-way or one-way will be discussed with the Egyptians. We have a delegation actually in Egypt right now as we're talking. Less publicized, but actually we're talking, and that's what's very important.
Well, you know, the 20-point peace plan does say the Rafah crossing should be open in both directions. Given that, is Israel committed to ultimately making sure that it is open in both directions?
Of course. We just have to be ultimately committed as well that guns are not once again being transported to the Hamas inside Gaza through the Rafah crossing. We have to make sure the Rafah crossing is secure.
You talk about the challenge of implementing this next phase. Hamas laying down its weapons, as you say, is going to be one of the toughest parts of that. How do you work with your U.S. partners to actually make sure that happens? And do you think that it's possible?
I do think it's possible, but it's not just a matter of laying down the weapons. There are 300 miles of underground tunnels. They're terror tunnels that were created by Hamas. They have to be destroyed. Otherwise, the arms are going to go down below. It's not only machine guns. We're talking about shoulder-range missiles. We're talking about all sorts of weapons that have to be destroyed and taken out of the hands of Hamas. Hamas cannot rule Gaza again. I think that the fact that the 20-point plan that President Trump implemented calls directly and unequivocally, unambiguously for the disarming of Hamas means that we're on the same page and it's going to get done. And that's why we're so hopeful.
Okay. All right. Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen. It's good to be with you.
Great to have you. And we are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There is more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.